All right. Well, it's 5:01, and we have this ARPA workshop here, and I'll just do a quick roll call. Councillor McEwen.
Here.
Councillor Prey.
Here.
Councillor Madore.
Here.
Councillor Danforth.
Here.
Councillor Bragdon.
Here.
Chair Gottlieb here. And we're missing a Pelletier, it looks like. Getting some messages here that.
I had admitted him at one point, and then I think he left, but he's joining again.
Oh, there he is. Yep, just joining right now.
Okay, we got
And
everything done. We can
Councillor-
finish now.
And Councillor Pelletier, are you here?
Yes.
All right. So we're all here. As a lot of you remember, the last meeting was fairly brief, which I'm not entirely opposed to. But you know, obviously these workshops are a public way to express and be a part of the thought process of the council. There may be some new items or not as many to discuss, but for this week, I know that there are at least a few that have come up at least since last week. I know that our manager has a couple things to share with us. I know that I've heard from at least a few people about a concern of having a application process given the small amount of money that we have and the large amount of projects that we obviously need to tend to, or at least large in terms of dollar amount. Those are a couple of items that have come up since. So, Mr. Manager, I'll just go to you for you to kind of share your perspective over the last week or so, I guess, since we met, and start there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since the last time we met on this, I've spent a considerable amount of time contemplating it. And I really feel that the application process and much of the intents of those organizations and groups who would be applying to that, I think are much better suited to be directed to the county for those requests. I think in the grand scheme of things, the amount of funding that is allotted to us is intended to go to us as a municipality, to go to needed improvements to our infrastructure. And to build on that, you know, it's been brought to my attention recently that we have a bridge here in town that is in need of, of high concern and need of repair. And that is a bridge that is owned by the town of Millinocket, that we are responsible for maintaining. Currently, the rating has had to be lowered on it to a much lower rate than is what usually is allowed on that for weight. And I understand that through Oliver Associates, with our Public Works Director, Ralph, there was recently some grant funding made available to us to cover basically half of the cost of that repair, that we needed to come up with a 50% match for that. The numbers I was given on that, and please don't quote me, but it's either $125,000 or $150,000, which is the awarded amount. And then, you know, 50% equally, we would have to come up with that to make that very much needed repair. Now, the total cost of that project was estimated at $300,000. This was early COVID, so we can imagine that at this point, the cost of that project would increase. And the grant funding that we were awarded, if not spent by, I believe, the end of this year, we would lose that grant funding. in which case a pertinent upgrade to that locally that we own as a municipality, potentially that $300,000 plus would be then directed to be dispersed through the taxpayers of Millinocket, and that would become a burden on our budget. I wanted to bring this to the attention of this group this evening, to consider much needed upgrades to the infrastructure within our municipality, to appropriate much of this funding to, as not to put it on as a future burden to the taxpayer of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I'll definitely go to council question and comment here, but just for clarification, I do believe Oliver and Associates submitted the grant for that and was awarded it.
Mm-hmm.
That is correct.
And
we
with
do
that, are they guaranteeing that cost if they performed that it would still stay the same cost to the town? So in other words, costs won't necessarily go up if we do award this, if it takes 6 months or so.
Are you referring to the cost of the project or the amount of the grant funding?
The cost of the project. Are they guaranteeing, because they submitted this and I'm assuming they'd want to conduct the work, are they guaranteeing that cost for us? Or has the cost gone up since then or might go up since then?
I would have to research that. I would have to ask and be able to find that out.
Thank you. Any other council questions or comments on that? Councilman Medora, then Pray.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I've been watching and reading of both issues in the Lincoln News and other publications of other communities and how they're dealing with their fund allotments. And their lists usually consist mostly of what the manager has been talking about, which is infrastructure work within the community that would otherwise be a burden on the taxpayer to take care of. And this way we could get a much needed, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but I think this was brought up originally before you were actually brought on as manager. I think probably maybe even 6 months or a year ago that this was brought up, that this bridge needed to have work done on it and that we needed to get some idea of when the project will be done, because it's only going to deteriorate more and more as we go on. So I think it's a good example of a prioritized situation that could benefit the town of Millinocket as a whole, moving that money forward as that part of the match. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Medora. Councilor Pray.
Yeah, Peter, you said we have until the end of the year, calendar year or fiscal year?
I believe with this, it is calendar year.
I believe it is
And
too.
please don't quote me on that. I just
Calendar year.
heard this information the other day. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Pray. Any other council comment or question on this? Councilor Pelletier.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the infrastructure bill that's been passed would be an appropriate source of that money versus the ARPA funds.
You're referring to the infrastructure funds?
Yeah, the bill that was passed this year.
If I'm not
Well-
mistaken, Mr. Chairman, I think it'd be more time sensitive to start an application process for the match, because I believe, as the manager has mentioned, the grant money, if we don't use it before an allotted time, we're going to lose it.
Thank you, Councilor Dora. And also that's partially why I asked if that is a firm price that'll hold. And, you know, if we do wait towards the end of the year, if it's not a big safety concern between now and then, which it seems it might be, that might give us some time to at least try to apply for the infrastructure funds and see what the result of that might be. But that is a whole other process that might take a lot longer and may not be dependable. So I guess, Mr. Manager, it comes down to time sensitivity and safety issues, which is obviously something we need to take into consideration strongly. Councilor Bragdon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just kind of bouncing off what you said, I'm curious to see whether, with everything that's going on in our lovely world today, whether or not cost has gone up. They said that they would match half, but realistically, how much is it going to cost us if we do it 6 months from now? Everything's going up in price. Does that mean this project is also going to go up in price, and is it guaranteed? Safety is obviously a huge concern as well. So I'd like to know exactly how much time we have as a safety concern. So maybe we can get those addressed before next meeting.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From my understanding, Council Brandon, it is not half of the project. It is, the grant was awarded at $125,000 or $150,000, and that our match was 50% of the total cost. So we would have to come up with an equal amount of money to that to put towards the cost of the project. But it's not splitting the project down the middle. So if there were additional costs for the project, I would imagine that would be on us to foot the bill for.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Any other council comment or questions on that? I do see a chat here from Susan D'Alessandro. I'm confused between ARPA funds and the other actual infrastructure bill. I thought within ARPA there was also separate funds for broadband and water sewer than the funds to the town. The funds the town got itself. Yeah, those are all separate sources of money, and there are different types of ARPA funds that were given to states and nonprofits and other organizations that are different than what we got. And we all adhere to different requirements, basically, on how we spend those funds. So the point that Councilor Pelletier brought up about the infrastructure bill, that is a separate source of funding altogether, something that we would have to apply to, which is why I was bringing up the issue of whether the price that Oliver Associates quoted, I'm assuming, is because they want to do that work themselves. If they would be willing to hold that price till the end of the year, that might give us time to apply for that separate source of funding if there's no major safety concerns. Any other comments on this, Councilor Madore?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, while I don't mind having an inquiry with Oliver and Associates, I think it's kind of unrealistic to the way the economy is going right now and the cost of materials and supplies to do a job of this nature. I don't think, I'd be very surprised to find that they would lock themselves in for a extended time period, saying that they could do it and then come up with additional expenses as far as materials and labor at the time for future renovation.
Thank you, Councilor Madore. Any other thoughts on this item? Yes, Mr. Manager, then Danforth.
In conversations with Oliver Associates recently, they handle our wastewater contracts and upgrades as well. It was brought to my attention that they do, at least in, I believe, the most recent engineered project, with the wastewater upgrade, put in the contract that the price remains the same. I'm not sure on how that plays into the bridge project here, but I know that that is something they have done in the past. Is, no matter the cause, the cost of the project and the amount they pay for the project stays the same. So I can reach out and confirm that one way or the other, but I do know it's something they've done in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Councilor Danforth?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I guess this question is for the manager. I'm not sure. Did you say what the cost of the bridge repair is? You're talking about what the grant award is, 125K, and we have to match it. Do you know the total cost of the bridge repair? Is that what you're going to go ask to get an estimate so we actually know?
In early COVID times, it was $300,000. We saw
Say
what
that
happened
again?
in the early stages of COVID. It was $300,000.
300. Okay.
We saw what happened to the CDBG project bid from the original budget. And I do understand that this project would have to go out to bid. So I really don't have the solid answer, but I'd have to make some more phone calls and have some other conversations to get the more tangible answer.
No, that's helpful because I didn't have that amount pictured. I didn't know what that might be. So I think the approach that you're taking as far as bringing to light some of our infrastructure issues that are, we need to take care of sooner rather than later, is good as we look at the list of what we have and a potential use of the funds so that we can then prioritize and figure out what we have. Because we've got 240,000. That's half of the total. That's the ballpark figure of what we have received so far. And so what we might be thinking about as we create a budget. So thank you for bringing this to our attention.
You're welcome. And I would add, just for those that are interested in these facts, I know mill rate is always a hot topic. And I believe the math works out that 300,000 would be pretty near 2 mills.
Less.
Just a little bit less.
It's about 190,000 per mill.
Okay, I had thought 160, but thank you for correcting me.
Thank you. Councilor McEwen?
Thank you. I'm just all for gathering the data. Kind of going off Councilor Danforth as well, seeing what that lines up as an option. If that project is going to be really an overspent line to what we receive in funds, it might be beneficial to look at some other priorities too, as we create that budget. But thanks for bringing it up too, because safety is a great concern, especially when it is with infrastructure and bridges. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor McEwen. Councilor Prey?
Yeah, I want to go back to a question we had last time in reference to Tom and the necessity of some funds being set aside for dealing with a similar type of situation. Tom's there as the town health safety officer and stuff, and his request was that we set up a sum of money aside, I think $20,000 or $30,000 for having the equipment and materials that would be necessary to protect the our ambulance crew, our fires and whatnot, and the department and stuff, and dealing with residences who may get sick in some type of pandemic in the future. I'd like to make sure that's one of the things that we take care of out of that fund as well.
I agree.
Thank you, Councilor Prey. Any other thoughts on the bridge item? Okay. And that kind of is a good segue anyway, Councilor Prey, because if this bridge becomes something of necessity, a health issue that we need to address in the near future, obviously that limits our ability to fund other projects, or at least offer funds for other issues such as the one Councilor Prey just referenced. So when it comes to our last discussion of having a conversation on having an application process to nonprofits or members of the community, as I had mentioned earlier, I've heard some concerns about that, just given the small amount of money that we have, and the potential for it to all be spent fairly quickly and easily. A suggestion that I have is to instead have an open period where we request at least written input from the community members, as opposed to requests for funds. That way we ensure that we have proper input and we hear from the community on what our discussions are basically headed towards. And I wanted to just pose that for the whole council to respond to, basically, if we should have an application process or not. Councilor Madore?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In a situation like this where, especially now that I think that the municipalities' needs in infrastructure have been brought to the attention of the council, I think that we need to prioritize what necessitates a need compared to a want. And I think that happens first through the municipality working on things like infrastructure, what Councilor Prey brought up as far as equipment for first responders to deal in the pandemic situation. Like I say, I think we need to go ahead, and then if there is money left over, if there is a piece of money, say, once everything is over and done with, I'm just throwing a figure out there, say there's 70,000 left, then we need to go ahead and start looking at what we can do in the community to try to help maybe some organizations or whatever. But first and foremost, I think the money needs to be used for the municipality to take care of the pending needs or safety issues for the town. And I think there needs to be a prioritization of these projects. So I would look for the council to start a list of priorities and then see how much those are going to cost, or get an estimate on those, and see what is left of the funds that have been expended or will be expended to the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Madore. Councilor Bragdon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I agree that this instruction needs to be handled in a very, well, maybe in a timely fashion, I also think it's extremely important for us to be transparent and ask the public their opinion. They may have ideas or suggestions or even safety concerns that we aren't aware of. It was just brought to our attention a couple of months ago that there were issues with street signs that some of us weren't even aware of. So I think it's extremely important that we get public input on this, whether it be an application process, or we find a way to get more public input in general. But the public does need to be included on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bragdon. Any other council comment?
We do seem to have some people in the
Councilor
chat.
Pelletier? Councilor
Yeah, I
Pelletier,
think,
sorry, you're a little back there.
Yeah, I don't know how formalized a process we would want to get into, given it's not that great an amount of money that we're dealing with, but maybe letters proposing stuff and that we could discuss in meetings. That kind of informal application. I think that would, I agree with Councilor Bragdon. We do have to get some input from the public, whether they feel our infrastructure ideas are the way to go, or maybe some other community project needs to be looked at. Let them at least make their case, and we can go from there. Personally, I'd like to see the revaluation done, so I think that's a big hindrance to economic development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Pelletier. Councilor McEwen?
Just a note on the public input. We don't really need a formal application per se. If we would still want to collect public input, as you suggested, just an idea that would help gather that input. Just like when we have done the town surveys, Design Lab should be able to, or would, based on our contract, put in a form that could be put on the website, and that link be shared on our Facebook page. Just like the general response section of the survey, when people literally can just put any dialogue they want in just a form feed box, that could be inputted for a certain amount of time, and then that report can be run from the back end of the website. And I'm sure that would be helpful, at least in trying to populate that data. So if people aren't on Facebook necessarily, they could still go right to the website and it could be kind of on the ARPA page per se where the resources are, or maybe right on the front. It's like a hot link, but it's an idea.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Any other council thoughts? Councillor Danforth?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in agreement that we don't go like the application route, but that we do get public feedback on where they would like us to direct some of the money. And I don't want to lose, we need to make sure that like there's PPE, the protective, what's the other P stand for, Tom? PPE.
Personal protection equipment.
There we go. Thank you. All these acronyms. Anyway, yeah, that we make sure that the town gets the equipment they need for
I'm
public safety.
unmuted, so don't say.
Okay. Oh. And also we need to keep in mind that we had discussions with Mobilize Katahdin beforehand, and it fits the work that they do, as community health navigator, linking people to social services. So I want to make sure Mobilize Katahdin stays on that list. But yes, not a formal application process, but certainly we solicit lots of input. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Danforth. Councillor Prey?
Tom, did you want to say something first?
Yeah, when it comes out to the public, right? Chair Goldie, you want me to wait till public input?
No, go
Okay.
ahead.
I just want to clarify on the PPE. I'm talking town-wide, okay? I'm talking for all departments, not just for mine. Okay, I'm advocating for everybody that we have this stuff available so that in case, not in case, when the next pandemic comes. And just to give you a little thing on the bridge, the bridge is posted. We had to post that bridge last year. We can't take a fire truck over that bridge.
Right.
So keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Malcolm. Councillor Prey?
Yeah, excuse me. I was the one that brought up the idea of an application, and the purpose of that is not necessarily, well, the purpose of that is to, if we get into helping non-governmental programs or agencies, that there's a strict process of what we know how they're going to spend the money, and if we give it to them, a commitment that they spend it in that way, that they don't use it for something else. Obviously, I think Mobilize Katahdin, for example, serves a number of communities and very supportive of that concept and idea. But I'd like to see other towns contributing some if we're going to be helping other communities that are part of Mobilize Katahdin. And that's a question of them coming in and say, if you give us this money, we're going to spend it this way. Hypothetically, if Mobilize Katahdin get money from Millinocket or East, they would say, here's how we're going to spend it in your community, or what we're going to do to that. I think that's a responsible way for us as counselors with funds that have been provided for the town of Millinocket to do. So rather the terminology of application process is a correct one. The intent is to know how they're spending their money, how they intend to spend it, and to assure that they agree to spend it in that fashion.
Thank you, Councillor Prey. And on that note, Mr. Manager, I know that you had reached out to some of the neighboring towns. I know you heard just briefly from East Millinocket that they had a general interest in combining efforts to some degree. Have you heard from Medway yet?
I have not. I'm happy to reach out and or continue to make that communication happen.
Thank you. And in the chat here, Susan D'Alessandro asked how much money is available through the infrastructure bill, not ARPA. I believe Maine received about $2.5 billion from that. And I'm not sure when that becomes available. That's something to look into. And Sandra Sullivan also said you are talking about building the new firehouse on Central Street and the fact that the water and sewer lines would need to be extended. Would that qualify for this money? Yes, I'm sure it would qualify, but we only have $244,000 roughly coming this year, or already came, I guess, and then another allotment of $244,000, and that's it. Given the amount of money in the infrastructure bill that would become available, I think that's personally, at least what we've discussed on the committee level, is what we're looking at going after, not the ARPA funds. Any other council comment? Yeah, Councilor Prey.
Yeah, Steve, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that, I had been looking to see where the federal infrastructure monies were in the process. My understanding, it's all going to be grant money. How much of it's going to be distributed to municipal infrastructure versus state infrastructure has not yet been fully decided, or at least how they're going to allocate it and put it out there. So I think we still need to wait to find out when that infrastructure funds are going to be available. Obviously, the sooner the better, since we're into construction with this thaw that we've got period now. But I guess I'd ask Peter either through MMA or try to reach out to the state to see if we'd know when the federal monies for infrastructure is going to be available to communities.
Thank you, Councilor Prey. Any other council comment on this? Okay, so we've addressed the bridge issue, the public input. Do we have a general consensus? Obviously not making decisions, but a general consensus that will, at least on the ARPA fund, put out a request for public comment, and maybe not necessarily a formal process for nonprofits. Councilor Madore?
Yeah, I still would, I want to say yes, but still not having the manager have the opportunity to get in touch with Oliver and Associates to kind of nail down a price on the bridge project, I think is going to be very important. And I'd also like to get an idea of what would be necessary in dollars and cents to implement what Tom has proposed for the departments. So I would look for those two to get information first before we move and do anything else. I think those are very important. And I was not aware that we can't get a fire truck across that bridge. And I think that speaks volumes right now.
Thank you, Councilor Madore. Any opposition to that thought from the council? Yeah, I see your hand, Councilor, or excuse me, Mr. Manager.
Nope, not a counselor. I just wanted to mention, Councilor Madore brought up the question of the cost and comparison from then and what it might currently be. I do have a message already out to our Public Works Director and Mandy Oliver, awaiting a response on that just since the beginning of this meeting. So I'm sure we'll find out tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Danforth?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm still in favor of having community input now. And I just say that because I want to hear ideas perhaps that our nonprofits have, because I think we might be able to help them identify funding sources if there's something that's, regional or in big idea. And especially when we bring on our community initiatives director, we might have then the capacity to look for other funding. So I don't want to not have an opportunity for community input, even though perhaps these funds right now might not be used for that. I think we still want to hear there'll be ideas and wishes and wants from our community. So still the input is good. And we can just be very transparent that we're going to take care of some real immediate, needs that for the town now, but still let's gather input. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Danforth. Councilor Bragdon also said he agreed in chat. And to Councilor McEwen's suggestion of having a text box or at least a short form to fill out on the website, is anyone opposed to having that put on the ARPA page for that purpose? Okay. So that'll be something I'll reach out. I'll
I
reach
do
out to
agree
Elon
with
after that.
I do agree with putting it on Facebook, though. It seems that recently we've been getting a lot of comments through Facebook. So I feel like that is a necessary place to put this.
Facebook and website. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, and I agree with that as long as the Council of Bragton continues to provide great answers and responses to our community members. And
Oh,
could be
you know I will.
could be a full-time job. I know the manager's doing a great job, but yeah, that medium mode takes a lot of work. So
I am
Mr. Mayor,
I
upset that,
enjoy it, so I'll continue.
I am upset that the council decided to call off Winterfest.
The council did that?
Well, on Facebook or somewhere out there, a lot of people thought the council canceled it, and the town manager interceded and responded to the comments that
Charlie,
not
didn't you
true.
know that everything you read on Facebook is true?
That's
That's
what I
right.
thought.
Good
That's why I
gospel.
believed what Peter said.
To add to
Mr.
that,
Manager, you had your hand up earlier.
I don't plan to make it a full-time job. In certain scenarios, I don't mind offering the explanation if I can help. I still don't believe that social media is the best place to be having those conversations, but I always do invite the community to contact me and share my email and phone number here at the office.
I completely agree, but we seem to have a pretty broad presence on Facebook, but I definitely think this forum should be on our Facebook page for those who would like to fill it out, to have a chance to fill it out.
It's a good place to vent.
All right, so on that note, I'll make sure that both Facebook and the website has a option for filling out comments on that.
excuse me,
Any
Mr.
other?
Chair,
Yes, Councilor Danforth, yes.
is there a way to just use Facebook to give a link to make comments, and so that
I
you don't
think
then
that
have
would
to
be-
have
yes.
comments? So it's not public facing that way. It sends you to a link to go and then fill it out. Thank you.
Yes.
Louder
that
for
would be
people in the
ideal.
back.
Yes,
No,
that's
but
where
if
I
they-
was headed
Exactly
with
what
that.
If they set up that hot link as a form page feed, they can just put that link directly on Facebook. So just limit that. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna get done. Okay. Any other comments on ARPA funds in general? We have discussed at least the two larger items. See in chat here, Sandra Sullivan, I'm sorry to say most people don't pay attention and could not tell you what ARPA funds are and have no idea what these meetings are about. I think you are completely correct in that. Yes. Any other comments from the council or public on ARPA funds? Okay, so next steps, the manager will get us some information as was requested in the meeting, and we can bring it up at the next meeting. And in the meantime, there will be a form for filling out some feedback from the public that will be available on Facebook and also on the website. All right. Well, thank you all, and have a good rest of your night.
You too.
Right.
Enjoy the kids.